It's quite nice out today, so let's go to the beach. Okay, that took a long time, almost 2 hours for what was only 54 miles. But why does a town so close to London feel so far away? Can better rail fix this town's economy, and how's some little rail line supposed to fix this? So what's Hastings? Hastings was probably important for some historical battle or something, but believe it or not, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Hastings is a town of around 90,000 people on the south coast between Dungeness and Eastbourne. But it's more importantly a big tourist destination because of some supposedly important stones on a hill and a nice pile of sand adjacent to the sea. Totally sand. However, Hastings is by far the biggest town in the country without a dual carriageway road, so driving here or getting the bus here is going to be a slow and windy trip. Which means getting the train should be a quick and easy alternative, right? Well, not exactly. The railway line here is quite similar. The Hastings line was built with many steep hills, tight curves and single-track tunnels. Obviously the line is quite slow, but it's also really crowded and congested. And when something goes wrong with it, there's huge disruption, as it's the only real link from Hastings to the outside world. The poor links between Hastings and London aren't just inconvenient, but hold back Hastings economically too. It's been found that small improvements in travel times of around the 2-hour range have large positive impacts on business travel and commuting. So improving the journey time between Hastings and London would clearly benefit Hastings. But somehow it takes the same time to get from Victoria to Hastings as it does to get from King's Cross to York. Hastings really isn't that far from London, but suffers from high unemployment levels due to its isolation. It's clear that improving the journey time between London and Hastings would have a significant positive impact on the economy of the town. But how can some quiet little rural line that almost got closed fix this? This is the Marshlink line. It runs the 26 miles from Hastings to Ashford, and honestly it's a really pretty line. With lots of listed buildings, nice countryside, a branch to a nuclear reactor, and little towns to visit. As with every railway line, it was originally built in the 1800 whatevers to compete with some other railway company, with a couple of relevant branches being added and then removed not too long after. Except the one to Dungeness, that one got to stay. The line got electrified between Hastings and Orr in the early 1930s, but they never got around to finishing it due to a minor disagreement with Germany in the following years. Which is a shame because it would be quite useful if it got electrified. We'll get to that in a minute. As with the story of literally every rural railway line, it struggled to be profitable and Beeching tried to close it. But because of how terrible the roads around Hastings are, they couldn't run the railway replacement bus that they used to distract people from the line being dismantled. So the line managed to stay open on the condition that it was single-tracked and the speed limit was reduced to save money. Something that also helped keep it open was the power station at Dungeness needing rail access. After the construction of the Channel Tunnel, talks of finishing electrifying the line appeared, but like with most ideas following the Channel Tunnel, nothing actually happened. And that brings us to the present day. The line is still unelectrified, single-tracked, only sees one train an hour, and requires a special fleet of diesel trains. Except from Orr going that way, the Gatwick Express is not diesel. That's not even the Gatwick Express. This isn't exactly ideal, as when one of the diesel trains breaks down, it means cancellations and disruption on the line, as none of Southern's or even Southeastern's other trains can run on the line. Right, so that's cool and stuff, but how is this small rural line going to help improve service between Hastings and London? As it turns out, the creatively named high-speed line, High Speed 1, goes through Ashford at the other end of the Marshlink line. And Southeastern's Javelin services from Ashford to London St Pancras only take about 35 to 40 minutes. So if we could somehow run a service from St Pancras to Hastings via Ashford, we could have a serious journey time improvement over the current service from Charing Cross in Victoria. Like that train. This seems like the perfect solution. Let's start this service now. Yeah, it's not so simple, unfortunately. There's quite a long list of issues. Let's start with the actual infrastructure. At Ashford International, the Marshlink line arrives into the wrong side of the station, and a new junction would be needed in order to bring Marshlink line trains onto the high-speed line. A little expensive, but not impossible to build. At Rye, where the passing loop on the single-track section is, this would need to be lengthened in order to fit Javelin trains, and we would need to close one of the level crossings there too. This is definitely doable and not too expensive. However, if we want to run a more frequent and reliable service, it would really be a good idea to just redouble the whole line again. However, this is where things start to get really expensive. This means relaying all of the track between Appledore and Orr, and yeah, that's very expensive. Something that's completely free, however, is subscribing to the channel. That way you'll never miss out on new videos and you can help support the channel. And if you want to help pay for train tickets, you can become a channel member and get your name on screen right here.
The blast!
But back to the Marshlink line. What's by far the biggest issue with this proposal is how to electrify the line. Currently between Hastings and Orr, the line has third rail. The simplest way to electrify the line would be to extend this third rail all the way to Ashford. The existing Class 395 trains run on third rail already past Ashford on other parts of the network, so this would be really simple to do, keeping their power changeover at Ashford. However, the DFT really doesn't want new third rail being built because it's unsafe for track workers, not super energy efficient, and not especially powerful. Electrifying the line with overhead wires would be quite a bit more expensive though. A 2016 study found it to be twice as expensive, $250 million for third rail versus $500 million for overhead. And that was 10 years ago. Overhead wires are much more energy efficient, much safer, and aside from the cost, are going to be the best way to electrify the line. But electrifying the line, third rail or overhead, is still very expensive. They actually keep sending everything but Southern here. We've Gatwick Express, now Great Western. No Southern. Infrastructure issues aside though, another pretty big issue is that the Class 395 Javelin trains are in quite short supply. We just have enough for the services that they currently run, especially after one derailed back in 2024. So there definitely aren't enough for an extra service to Hastings. We would need to buy new trains capable of running on High Speed 1, which won't be especially cheap. But this would also be introducing a new type of train into Southeastern's fleet, complicating maintenance and timetabling. However, there just isn't a way around this, unfortunately, unless you want to replace all of the Javelins, but that would be a waste of money. An interesting idea that Hitachi offered was to order new bimode trains, much like what LNER or Avanti have, that could run on electric on High Speed 1 and then switch to diesel to run on the Marshlink line. This gets around the expensive issue of how to electrify the line, however you still have a unique fleet of trains for the line, which are now slow accelerating diesel trains, which isn't exactly ideal, in addition to the fact that diesel causes air pollution and all that. And one final thing to think about is if there's actually even space on High Speed 1 for more services. Well, yes, there is space. However, a lot of people are eyeing up this space, from open access operators wanting to run more services to mainland Europe, to freight operators wanting to run more service to the new Barking Euro terminal. That guy's loud. So if we wanted to secure the free paths on this line for Hastings, we would need to be doing this sooner rather than later, because in the future, these free paths may not exist and Hastings may not get its link to London. So yeah, it's clear that Hastings needs better links to London and the rest of the southeast in general, and that upgrading the Marshlink line is the way to make that happen. What remains unclear is how exactly this is going to happen, and how good of a service we get ultimately depends on how big our budget for this is. Anyway, that's all for today's yapping session. You should probably subscribe, and I'll see you next time.